Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Pierre Langlais. I'm a French TV series journalist and critic for Télérama, a weekly cultural guide based in Paris, and a member of the ACS, as you can see on the screen, which is the French TV Series Critic Association. I'm very happy to be on stage today to talk about how data can impact creativity in TV series. Before we started, let me introduce the three panelists who kindly agreed to have questions asked with a French accent today. And you will have 5 minutes, I do 40 minutes, and then you have 5 minutes to react or ask questions at the end of this panel. So we have Jenna Santoianni with us today. Good afternoon, Jenna. You have your mic right here. Jenna, you're Executive Vice President for TV series at Sonar Entertainment. You oversee the development and production of series like Taboo and the upcoming Mr. Mercedes and The Sun. We have also with us today Joe Lewis. Good afternoon, Joe. Sorry, please.
We're going to play an entire episode of Man in the High Castle now.
Joe, you're head of comedy, drama, and VR at Amazon Studios, and so you're in charge of developing shows such as Transparent, Mozart in the Jungle, and the upcoming Jack Ryan. And finally, Kasper Barfoed. Good afternoon, Kasper.
Good afternoon.
You're from Denmark. You're a writer and a director for both movies and TV series, and you worked, among other things, on Those Who Kill, Dicta, and more recently, Below the Surface, which you created, and you're also the showrunner of.
Yes.
So, we are here to discuss a very complex and current subject. How can data influence creativity? I hope this will be a discussion on whether or not, using any kind of numbers, polls, data, algorithms, any kind of info gathered from the viewers, if it can have an impact on what kind of show you are doing, on what hero you'd better have, etc. To discuss with an open mind, personal beliefs, and some concrete examples, whether or not this can affect creativity and limit writers, producers, directors' creativity and freedom. So please let me start with a naive take on this. My dad is a philosopher. He doesn't care at all about television. He doesn't even have a television. But he cares about art and discussing and talking about art. A couple of weeks ago, I was preparing this and I talked with him. And I asked him how he felt about the question that we have on screen. And he said, quote, "If one wants to please the audience, complies somehow to its wishes, then one is not making a piece of art, because art is surprising people, not feeding them what they want." So let me start with a question for everyone. First, can you do without data today in the television world and the fiction world, not everything being on television right now? Can you do without data, or is it part of your everyday life of each of you and there is no way to avoid them? Who wants to start? Joe.
I don't want to start a panel by just disagreeing with your dad entirely, but I will. I mean, data is unavoidable. It can be helpful. It can also be really hurtful. I find it's a tool to enhance creativity. I think it's been, you know, I don't know if it's been misused in the past, but it's been sometimes used right and sometimes used poorly. And the idea of doing it to please an audience is different than trying to use it to guess what will please an audience in the future. I think that's always, you know, that's the magic of this. I mean, you know, you're talking about art with your dad, and, you know, if you define art as, you know, you're challenging both yourself as the creator and you're challenging, you know, the medium itself, it's sort of irrelevant what the medium is, whether it's painting or sculpture or television. You're trying to do something different, something that you believe will connect with people. And, you know, I just feel like no matter, if you're an artist, you have something you want people to feel, and you just happen to like the feel of your particular medium. And that's all we try to use it for, is guess what will move people, not now, but it takes a while to develop and make these things. You know, what do people want to watch in a year or two? And, you know, I'll shut up after, you know, just a brief example is, you know, our show Transparent, which is an early show that did really well for us. And, you know, there wasn't...
a very good show.
Thank you. Did your dad like it?
He's not watching any TV.
I'm going to get him a DVD. I'm also going to check if we make DVDs of it. By the time that show came out, I feel like it was a good it was just the perfect timing of show at the right moment that it premiered, and there's no way you could tell that then. And you know, there's a lot more examples of that, but I'll stop talking.
Jenna, can you do without data, or is it now part of your everyday life?
I think we can make great shows without data. I mean, for us, it's all about the creator's vision from the moment they walk in the door of what's the show that they want to make, what's their singular vision. And at Sonar, we support that. You know, we give them a place where they can make the show that they want to make. I think the data comes into it once you've made the show and you have to market it and you have to find that audience. And you have to trick them a little bit into this is something that's sort of familiar to you, but don't be afraid of surprise. So, you know, for example, The Sun, we made that show, it's already been in the can for a few months before it airs this weekend on AMC in the US. So the data really comes in once you have the finished product. How are you going to position it within the marketplace?
Okay, so it's more of a marketing tool, according to you.
I think so, because if you let data completely hinder the creative process, or you're a slave to data, you know, I think you can go down a rabbit hole that isn't what your creator intended to make when they first signed on. So,
a follow-up question for Joe before moving to Kasper. You at Amazon, you have the pilot system where people can vote for their favorite pilots. This is some kind of, it's not exactly data, but it's giving the power to the viewers, so using what they like, so to speak. What if the pilot you like less is chosen? Do you comply to the vote? So do you comply to what people want? Or do you sometimes say, listen, this one, nobody wants to watch it, but I like it so much, I'm going anyway?
So to answer it, you know, I have to, you know, just make something clear. The definition of vote in this case isn't an explicit, I choose this, I don't choose this. It's not a binary choice. Your vote is the same thing that happens when you watch any network that's measured by ratings. You know, what we're trying to do is measure who chooses to start a show, who chooses to finish a show. And, you know, I'm not even more often than not, I would say almost since the beginning, and I've been there since the beginning of Amazon, what ended up getting chosen were the things that we actually, that you think we're going to go, and the shows that you think are good are the shows that the audience responds to. And, you know, the key part is, you know, when you talk about explicit versus implicit, I think there's a difference sometimes between what people say they like, what people actually watch. You know, we've talked about this before. I've talked about this before. Transparent was not the most viewed pilot when it came out. What it was it had an incredibly high completion rate. It means people that started the show finished the show. The feedback on the show, the rewatch rate was significantly higher than other shows, and the critical feedback is good. You know, there are a lot of ways to buy or get people to watch the first minute of a show or the first episode. What's incredibly hard to do is get people to watch to the credit sequence, get people to watch the last episode of something. In the same way traditional TV has always said, here's the episodic drop-off, here's the drop-off throughout the season. We do the same thing, and, you know, I truly believe that, you know, the best show will have the highest completion rate because people want to find out what's going to happen next.
Kasper, as a writer and director, do you have any relationship with the data? Do the people you work with sometimes give you infos? I guess they can at least tell you who's watching their channels. But do you have any connections? Were you given once numbers or things that might influence the way you're working?
Well, of course, a lot of numbers float around, and for each broadcaster, they might have a different, you know, viewership and have opinions on who their audience is. I'm not so afraid of it. I think it makes sense to consider it human research. Who am I talking to? Who's actually going to listen to this? I certainly think there's a bad way to use it if you let it influence the process too much. But I don't think it's a problem to ask yourself questions, ask the audience questions before you start. How do you respond to this? When you make movies, you do screenings as well. We also get these numbers, but it's actually more about finding out, do people respond the way we expect them to respond or not? So I think it makes sense to ask yourself before you start, to give yourself a framework to work within, but not to design the project, which is not what I'm hearing these two say. But certainly, I think it needs to be used with care.
Is it a fantasy that we think that some channels or some websites or have like data so precise that they know exactly what kind of story they have to do, what kind of character they have to build, what kind of, even from the jobs or the music they have to use? I mean, is it a fantasy from viewers and from journalists, or you seem to say that data are very large and not so precise?
Will you share?
No, I don't. It is to me, it is a fantasy that you can do that. You have to. There's if a hyper-efficient system like that, I just don't know that they exist. It doesn't exist in economics. That's why you have markets. It doesn't exist in art. That's why you have a comparison. Something's good because something else is bad. And you know, the flaw in all of this, that might be true if you could buy every single idea and compare them with each other. But no matter what, you know, it's my point of view that, you know, we shouldn't be buying shows just to develop them. We just try to buy stuff at Amazon that we're going to make and make quickly. So you have to cut the thousands of ideas we see a year down to 50 projects in development, and out of those 50 projects, you know, hopefully some large percentage gets made. But when you're buying those projects, you have no idea. All you're doing is trying to listen to your gut. This is something I would watch. This is something I think our audience would watch. This is something that seems risky and new and different. And there's no data in that quick math your brain does.
And it's that thinking that's really helped companies like Sonar, because we do all of our development outside the system and then bring it to people like Joe. So it's actually benefited independent studios like us in the long run.
Joe, you said earlier that data were useful not to do shows now, but to think about what you can do in the future. But isn't the thing that people are watching now is now, is not the future? So if you trust data, isn't there a risk that you'll do TV for now and not for tomorrow? Because data are now, they are not. You cannot, you know, jump into DeLorean and be in the future.
I feel like that was a very Charlie Kaufman-esque question. I mean, there's different kinds of data. If you're watching, you know, if you're doing series ratings, you know, those ratings are measuring what you're going to be doing. Specifically, I'm talking about our pilot ratings, and you know, it could be 6 to 12 months, if not more, after a pilot comes out. And what feels good now might not feel as fresh or as good then. And I tend to find if you can't find anything risky about an idea when you're thinking about doing it, at the immediate, you know, stage of buying it, by the time it comes out 1 to 3 years later, at that point, it's usually behind their curve. You need something that feels a little risky so that by the time it comes out, it still has that excitement that comes through.
As a creator, as a writer, director, Kasper, you try to stay focused on the ideas you have, or do you consider that you're part of a system and then you have to more or less, my question was basically, do you have to fly higher than that and not care about anything and be focused on your ideas, or your ideas depend on what's going on around you, and so you cannot live in your bubble?
Well, I think you have conversations in the beginning to find out what direction we're going. I think it's very dangerous to try to put yourself in other people's brains once you're actually working. I think you have to trust your gut and always feel free to go with any idea you have. So no, as soon as I'm working, I'm working. But of course, you have conversations beforehand to try to focus the aim. And afterwards, of course, when the project is finished, you discuss how are they going to sell it. But no, I don't call them every day and you think we should do this or that, and I don't even think about it. When I'm writing, I'm just writing what I feel and what is in my stomach.
Can you use the data to do exactly the contrary of what data are saying? Meaning that if you know how people like things, then if your job is to surprise them, to go back to my dad, you try to trick them or to do the opposite.
I don't think you can use it like that at all. I don't think you can go that specific with it. I think it'll give you a general feeling of people respond to this or that. But I don't think you can pare it down to this idea or that idea, that this casting choice or that casting choice. It doesn't work like that. And as you say, people want to be surprised. People couldn't tell you what they would want, or it wouldn't end up the way they actually want it.
They can still guide what you want to do. I mean, there's tons of kinds of data. Data point might be, what show has won the Emmy for Best Drama over the past 5 years. And if you look at that data, you would go, well, if I want to win the next Emmy for Best Drama, I should do a very serialized show that feels like a long movie, and nothing episodic. That would be crazy. But when you're actually in these jobs and you're trying to think about how do I cut through, how do I find something that feels different, for a number of reasons, why might I want to do something different? You might look at that and go, all right, there's a lot of that kind of show. What isn't there? Maybe there's an anthology. Maybe there's something that might be different. And my guess is that all of us will have a favorite type of show 5 and 10 years in the future that doesn't exist now and will feel obvious. So there's also that. You're looking at data to go the other direction. What is there a lot of out there? Same thing goes on the comedy side, frankly. I mean, one of the things we're trying to develop, it's been a while, I think, since a multicam won an Emmy for Best Comedy. Maybe that says to me, I know the format can be used for sophisticated programming again. Maybe there's an opportunity there because no one else is doing it. What I just don't believe is that things that have worked in the past, anthology, standalone series, multicams and comedy, won't work again.
It's interesting that you talk about Golden Globes, Emmys, because it's not always the most popular shows that get prizes. And to me, Datas was more about the viewers. But is Datas also looking at what's popular in terms of critics or in terms of prices? I mean, please enlighten me in terms of what I believe was data.
Well, that's the thing. There's so much data. I mean, it could be, like we said earlier, there's the ratings, it can all be manipulated. So you can either use it for your gain in positioning your show, or, like Joe said, you can find that hole in the marketplace of who's the underserved audience. Or I think, like with our show, Mr. Mercedes, we saw something that was popular, detective series, that can be popular in both broadcast television and can be popular internationally and popular on cable. And we tried to craft a series that satisfied a lot of those different audiences and brought a different perspective to what you would usually see as a standalone detective series.
And Stephen King is a data himself.
He is. There's a lot of data about him.
And I think awards are great. I mean, a piece of conceptual data I think about a lot is, what show will have the best, and I say this a little jokingly, but only a little, live plus 20 years, which is the thing that in 20 years will hold up, will be the thing that people continue to watch, will continue to subscribe to a service. And, my guess is when you have that data and go, all right, in live plus 20 years, certain things stood out. These shows were probably better than the rest. That's why they stuck around. And shows that were better than the rest tended to win some awards. That's not necessarily why you do it, but there's a relationship between those. So, awards, to me, they are important. They signal that you're doing the right thing. It's also great press. I can speak for Mozart in the Jungle when it won the Golden Globe for Best Comedy. Huge uptick in viewership. People just become aware of the show, and in a world with limited time to watch television, it signals this will be a good use of your time.
So are you kind of saying that everything that I write might be used as data, even journalistic work?
I'm just trying to talk about TV till y'all get Prime. Great service, great television, great deliveries.
So I'm sure you cannot go into detail because that's probably the secrets of your work. But to go back to basics, how do you work with data? You have someone working with you, keep an eye on something and give you numbers, or is it concretely, how does it look and how do you work with data? Can you do that?
Oh, this is me. Yeah, I mean, it probably looks like what you think. We have a research department. We get a lot of data. We try to call through that data. We try to ask, if we see something that's anomalous or interesting, you always ask, why is this? Is it the show? Is it the timing? Is it the idea? Is it the creator? Is it the press? But the process looks like a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper and a bunch of smart people in a room trying to do their best by making sense of those numbers. And, you'd say, well, that show has a higher completion rate and a rewatch rate. What does that mean? That seems obvious. And you're just trying to find more things like that. This show has a lot of people, a lot of new people to the service. That's good too. This show, people watch quickly. The speed that someone finishes a show is a good indicator of how they like it. If it takes them a year to watch the first season, that's not as good as if they feel compelled to watch it in a week.
Jenna?
I was gonna ask Joe how much of that you share with your producers, or is it more?
very little. You know, we talk about numbers in the abstract. You know, I think it is important. One of the things that you might not get today that you'd get in the past is a great feedback loop of, my show aired last night, let me look at the newspaper and see what the ratings are. They're going down. Why is that? Is that my fault or is that something else? So we do try to share, you know, larger concepts. This is what we see working. There was drop off here. Here's what we think why. Here's why we think that matters, or maybe it doesn't matter. You know, we don't share exact numbers. I'm a believer in that. I just think it's not a great way for someone who's creative to think about art and try to game a system of numbers. So we talk about it to the extent it's helpful, but if a show's going great and we're really happy with the creative, my point of view is let the artist behind it focus on the creative, and you know, no news is probably good news.
Yeah, I was about to follow up on that and ask, how can you bring those data to the writers or the directors? Do you just like keep them for yourself? At some point, you have to let some of it go through and use it. I mean, how can you use it without influencing the writers, the directors, even maybe the actors, the casting directors?
I think if you're lucky enough to make it to a second season, which is hard to do, I think you really can look at it holistically, you know, especially for shows that are done globally. A lot of the shows we work on launch all over the world at similar times. And look at the data from each place, and not only your home country or your anchor market, and look at it, you know, after a whole season and decide what was working for season 1, what influences season 2. I think when you're in it and making it episode by episode, it's a lot harder to incorporate that kind of data because, you know, if you're making something straight to series, you don't have that luxury.
I was about to ask. You kind of already started to answer that, but... Well, yeah, it's you, Joe, sorry. But then, Kasper, if you've ever been in a situation when the TV or the producers told you, listen, we've heard that this and this works better than this and this, I don't know.
Not during production, but you certainly get faced with it when during the marketing. This kind of trailer, that kind of trailer, and who we hope is going to watch it and who not. But that's someone else's game. So I haven't really been confronted with it that much, except for the very beginning and then the very end. And I think it would be problematic if I was. It wouldn't help any. It would only, yeah, be a dangerous thing to do.
You want to add something on this matter?
No, I got nothing.
Jenna, you seem to say that the best data are for season 2 of a show. Like, obviously, you have numbers on the same story, so it helps. But how much can you use data from a past show to create a new one? Can you make the same use of data coming from something else? Or is obviously the best when it's season 1, helps you building on season 2 or season 3, etc.?
Well, look, you can manipulate data to make you feel good about, or to make your point about your show however you need to. I mean, there's so much that you can look at. You know, in terms of season 1 to season 2, you have data that's specific to your show after season 1. Because, you know, hopefully, I mean, you set out to create something that's different than every other show. If there was data to create the one perfect show, we'd probably be looking at 400 very similar shows.
Yes, but it could be that you'd rather use data from show that worked to create something similar, right? I mean, if you look at it cynically, you know how this show is very popular, then you're going to try to do the same.
To me, that's sort of like if there was a gas station that did really well off a freeway and you wanted to build 10 more gas stations, they probably won't all continue to do as well. I feel like TV is a little bit like that. People get their fill. People, you know, I find a lot of times people think of brands as this reductive thing, and people only want to watch one certain kind of programming, and I just don't think that's the case. But you want to be the best show of a certain type of programming. I've just always found that your chances for success are better if you're trying to do something that no one else is doing, and you pull it off. People will go to you because they can't get that anywhere else, and that's not data driven. Except to say what isn't in the market. I mean, the absence of data can also be telling.
I was about to say it's easy for you because on Amazon you're kind of trying to figure out what is nowhere else. But don't you think that maybe on big networks there's a search for good old already working formats, and that the data could be used in a way that I was saying, that maybe everybody around on this stage is trying to create new and surprising shows, but also there is some kind of fear in the market that would push people to use data to do the same story over and over again, right?
I mean, you could. I mean, I think it's a producer's worst nightmare to be the imitator of something really successful. You never want to be the second show that's kind of like a successful show, but not that successful show. I mean, imitation is a very sincere form of flattery, but I think you can use it to say, like, okay, what's the DNA of something that works, but then how do you spin it off in a different direction? Like, how can you be the next wave of, you know, how do you completely reinvent a medical show or a procedural show to work for a different audience? I mean, yes, but you still, the creative has to back it up. The creators and the producers still have to find that special thing that makes you different, stand out.
I thought you were about to say something.
No, there's this story that Netflix, when they did House of Cards, they looked at the data and found that our audience would like someone like David Fincher to that. But that's actually interesting because that's a director who doesn't give a shit about anything. So they're actually saying we would like a director who doesn't really want to cater to us. He just wants to surprise us. So I think that's what the audience ultimately is saying.
But you can look at the history of cinema, and there's people. You can take out, you know, people who are everything is vastly different, and sometimes they fail and sometimes successful. There's a lot of people. I don't care whether, I mean, I imagine it's true in every line of work. There's just some people who are right more often than not. And if you have people working for you, I'm sure you've observed some people are right more often than not. If you have filmmakers you follow, I'm sure you follow them because they're right more often than not. And that's the kind of data that you can look at when you're doing a straight to series sort of decision. Does this person have an audience? Does that audience look like our audience? Does this person have a history of making successful programming? You know, that's the kind of stuff. You know, we tend not to do a lot of straight to series, and if we do, it's really writer-director driven because you can look at a history of what people made and, you know, to my point of view, make an educated guess on what they're going to make next and how it'll be. It doesn't always work, but hopefully mostly.
Can we try, without spoiling too much your everyday secrets of work, and to start with you, Jenna, concretely, what have you learned from data if you have the opportunity to make your choices better or to create better shows? Concretely, I don't know how long data have been around, probably a long time. But we seem to talk even much more about it these days. Concretely, what have you learned from data that have, to your mind, make you a better executive?
I think we've learned, or I've learned, the importance of creating content that's global. Even if you're producing for, you know, if we're producing for a network that only airs in the U.S., it's great to look at how the show plays around the world and which actors stand out, and look at which storylines are resonating, what genres are resonating. And so for me, it's a lot of looking at what's working around the world and seeing if it's working in other places, maybe it can work for me here, you know, in the US. And, you know, just really being a student of it and taking a holistic view.
Yeah, that's a very specific thing that you're saying about the international impact of television, because that's true. We've been talking a lot of inside reflection, inside, like, to create the best show, but data can also be used to figure out where you're going to sell your show. Is that what you're saying?
Sell your show, or also to see, like, if something's working really well in France or in the UK, you know, we're all humans. We all have the same emotions and the same, like, why is it working there, and how can we replicate something similar here that can also travel? So.
Same question for you?
I mean, the truth is, you know, I don't think about data on a daily basis. You know, my secret is try to be working earlier than most people and stop working later than them. And while I'm doing that, I'm reading scripts and I'm trying to do what all of us do, which is just sort of conjure up what the experience of this will be like as an audience member watching it, and what will confuse me, what would make me pulled into it more. You know, data is important, but you have to allow data to collect. Data isn't the thing itself. Data is like giving a note on a script. I could care less if someone implements my note, assuming it's even right. but what's the spirit of the thing? The spirit is something's off in this scene. Have we gone for a number of reasons? And data is just trying to articulate something else that's out there. Are you doing the right thing? Are you making the right thing? And are you making it in the right way? You know, data itself is not the end goal. The end goal is to articulate just this unspoken thing of, is this thing good? Is this thing, in our case, you know, worth spending a lot of money, time, and telling our customers this is something that we think you'll love?
But you'll never put data first. You'll always start. Earlier, listening to you, at least two of you used the word guts. It's always guts over data.
I wouldn't say it's always guts over data. It's always both. It's always like you take data and it informs your conversation, and then, you know, guts is just another word for just your instinct based on a lot of past experience. And that past experience could be in storytelling. That past experience could just be being sensitive to what a customer would want or an audience member would want. I always find it fascinating at Amazon when, you know, people have very smart, intelligent, and accurate opinions who don't necessarily work in television all the time, but they're extremely good at thinking about what would our customer want, thinking about the customer first, and applying that to television. And that's not data-driven. Some people are more often than right in where to put the camera. Some people are more right than others, and we think a customer would like this. That could be a TV show. It could be a piece of hardware. That could be a product or a service of any kind.
Kasper, if you were to be given as many data as you wished, if you were to know exactly who you're writing for, directing for, I mean, if you had all the data in the world, could it become a creative tool for you?
No, but again, I think that also the word data is just annoying because it makes it feel like it's a big robot, right? But it's actually...
To me, it's the word Trump that's annoying.
Yeah.
You're saying it, data's fine.
That's another conversation. But you can also call it the responses of human beings. And you'd be an idiot not to be interested. How do people respond to the stories we tell? No, I wouldn't want more. I think it's a part of the research that we do. It's also, when I do something, I ask people. And I know you shouldn't, but I also read the threads online. But just to get a feel of how do they hate it, do they love it, what do they respond to? Do they think it's funnier or less funnier than I thought, or more emotional, less emotional? So I think it's just about being interested in how human beings react to what you do.
So you're open to that because it's not exactly data or any kind of numbers, but one question that often comes when you do a masterclass or a long interview with a writer, or even any sort of executive producer, of a successful show will be, do you keep an eye on the social networks? Do you look at Twitter? Do you look at what's going around? And you will have like two different schools. The school of, oh, no, never, I don't even own a Twitter account. And the school of, yeah, I do. And if some viewers say something interesting, I might think about it.
I look at it all the time. I don't know if you guys do. I read everything on every one of my shows. Doesn't mean I listen to it, but I find it fascinating. But in the same way, I will take thoughts from an intern, and this is the same as the primary executive on a show. It's just all incredibly interesting. And we work on these things for a while, and it's nice to see feedback. I don't pretend like I don't see it, but I'm also not the creator and artist at the front of it. And you work in a bubble, and every single person who's made something has gotten to the point where they've said, I think it's good. I don't know anymore. I'm too close to it. And sometimes it's nice to be go to the outside, and especially when stuff's good, it feels good. It's part of the reason I'm in this. It's fun to make things that people like, that makes their day better, that makes their life more interesting. And there aren't that many opportunities to get that feedback.
Jenna, do you keep an eye on this kind of data, which is the social networks?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely look at it. I think particularly we make a lot of shows based on big IP, so there's built-in audiences, and you want to see if you're finding a new audience and a new awareness with people who aren't familiar with the IP, but you also want to make sure that your core audience and your fanboys are satisfied. So we sort of look at that intersection, but yeah, it's hard not to. You want to know that what you're making is being watched and appreciated, and that it's hitting the zeitgeist in some way, which is really hard to do with a lot of product out there these days.
Kasper, do you?
Yeah. I mean, as a writer, I don't think it's always healthy because, but you can't not, because as they're saying, you're interested in how people react. Do they like it or not? And do they react differently than I thought they would? So, of course, you end up reading a lot.
I have one last question to each of you, and that's the DeLorean question. That's the future question. That's the one where you can probably invent or create something. If you could have one data that doesn't exist, if not every data exists, if you could know one thing, what would it be, and how would you use it?
I mean, mine was that, you know, when I said before, what's live plus 20 years, I'm really only interested in making things that people are going to watch and watch for a long time. You know, that's the one piece of data that I just can never have. What will people think of this in one generation and more?
That's a good one. Jenna, any idea on what you'll create?
I think it would just be awareness. You know, in feature films all the time, they track, you know, how many people are going to go out to the theater, and there's a lot closer correlation between what that tracking can be. And I feel like in TV, we're still surprised all the time of like, is it going to hit or is it not? Is the marketing working? Is it not? And, you know, having that crystal ball would be scary, but it would also be kind of nice.
Kasper?
No, I can't think of it. No, I wouldn't want to know more than I do. At the end of the day, I have to stay true to what I believe in, and so I'm absolutely fine with the data I have.
So we have a bit more than 5 minutes. We have almost 8 minutes. So thank you. First, let me thank you, Jenna Santoianni, Joe Lewis, and Kasper Barfoed to have answered my questions. Then you guys, if you have more questions, please feel free. I don't know if there's a mic going around. And if there isn't, this is not such a big room that we cannot hear you. There is a mic going around. So does anyone have questions, follow-ups, reflections? Yes, there is one here.
Hi, a question for each of the panelists. I wonder if you could give one real-life example of where data has informed a creative decision, whether that might be casting or plot or who a director is. Are there examples where you can say, because we knew X, that informed a creative decision Y?
I mean, I gave the transparent one's probably the biggest one, where it was not the most watched show when we put out the pilots, but it was the one that, you know, all implicit indications were that people that watched, that started the show, really liked the show. And, you know, and a more old school pilot system where it was 5 to 15 people sitting in a room watching a pilot and pointing out how it might not work, I'm not sure that the show would have gotten through.
I think for us, the closest example I can think of is when we were choosing our lead actor for The Sun. We had a last-minute recast, and we were looking at who we thought would be the best choice, and we were able to analyze, you know, who was the most meaningful star on a domestic and a global, in a global way, and that was Pierce Brosnan for us. So I think that's about the closest that we've ever gotten.
His accent seems good. I like it.
Of course it's good.
It's great. I like hearing that come out of Pierce.
I did a movie once that was a soccer movie, so we had kind of given up selling it to women. But then when we screened it, we realized that actually women responded stronger to it than men. So the job became to let these women know that this was more of a movie for them. So that changed the marketing a lot, just getting responses from the test audiences. That's, yeah.
Is there any more questions or reflections, or is that it? Yes, there was one here.
This is one for Joe. You mentioned a couple times you went between audiences and customers. And obviously Amazon has a lot of customers, but they're also sometimes an audience. So does that inform the kind of decisions you make? And I'm thinking specifically about something like American God. You know, Neil does a lot of transactional business, if you see what I mean. So is that the reason why that would have been an interesting, you know, show for you?
The answer is, I mean, yes and no. I use them completely interchangeably. Honestly, to me, audience and customers mean the exact same thing. And, you know, no part of our job making television at Amazon is about you know, selling more books or whatever it is. That said, you know, you think about the audience, who's on your platform. And if the audience on our platform read a lot of books, you want to say what kind of books. And if they read a lot of Neil Gaiman books, that seems like a good opportunity. You know, we have some, you know, we just announced last week we're going to be doing Barry Jenkins' follow-up to Moonlight, an adaptation of Colson Whitehead's book Underground Railroad, which is an incredible novel that came out last year. And you know, again, you're just trying to find what type of audience, and it's people that are reading Colson and reading Neil, and you try to go backwards that way. But you know, I don't say an audience member and also a customer who buys toilet paper, because I hope they're the same person.
Thank you.
It's great deals on toilet paper, said Joe Lewis.
We have time for one last question. Yep, there was on the other side.
What has been data growth in the last few years? Because we talked about data, like they're everywhere, and do you keep getting more and more data and more precise, or is it more a dystopian kind of feeling that data never stop?
Did you say dystopian feeling? I'll try. No, it doesn't. It still feels like art. I still work all day long with amazing artists, and you know, Jill Soloway and Barry Jenkins and Whit Stillman and Woody Allen and all of these brilliant people. My conversations throughout the day aren't about data this and data that. It's talk about art as much as we do data.
But do you have more data, concretely?
I have so many numbers. I have a room full of all the numbers. I have all the biggest numbers. So if you guys need numbers, don't talk to me, but there's a great team of executives who know where all the numbers are.
We might have one last question if someone had one. If not, then I think it's... Oh, yeah, there is one last. On the other side here.
Hi, just one question. We're seeing that Netflix is testing like the number of episodes and the length of the episodes. Is this something that we would consider as data, and as it would be used as creating an IP, for example, for Transparent, or I don't know, any of a Sonos series?
I think so. I mean, I think that's something you do look at. How many episodes of something does it take, or will people watch? I think there's a lot of there is a lot of flexibility, and I think there's still a lot to learn about what's the right number of episodes and for what kind of story. But the one thing I guarantee is it's not the exact same answer for every single show or kind of show.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you again for being with us today, and thank you for coming. Thank you.